Hello, good little boys and girls. I think it's time I shared my life's story. How I came to be who I am today. Much like you, I once had an untold future, waiting to be discovered. And tonight, I have someone special here to narrate that story for you, none other than the wonderful Jasmine Velasco. You see, I presented her with the chance to tell my life story, and she was absolutely thrilled to do so. So get comfy, grab your milk and cookies. Oh, how I love a tall, cold glass of milk. And settle in for a magical tale. Enjoy!
Chapter 1. A Life in the Shadows. Émile sat at the worn wooden table in his small apartment, staring out of the window at the fading light of the day. The streets of Trois-Rivières below were quiet, the soft hum of evening settling over the city. His mother, a once vibrant woman now weathered by years of hardship, sat across from him, her hand loosely gripping a half-empty glass of wine. The smell of alcohol had long since become a familiar part of Émile's life, something he'd learned to accept but never embrace. The weight of silence filled the room. It had been like this for years now, ever since his father left, and the world seemed to close in on his mother. She was once full of laughter, her eyes sparkling with a joy Émile barely remembered now. But life had taken its toll, and with each passing year, the weight of her struggles had only grown heavier. Relationships had come and gone, leaving nothing but broken pieces behind. Émile's mind often wandered during these quiet moments. He was a keen observer of the world around him, more sensitive to the emotions of others than his own. He saw the way the media twisted narratives, filling people's minds with fear and confusion. He saw how society seemed to spin in endless circles of negativity, and he longed for something more, something real, something true. His mother's voice broke through his thoughts, soft and slurred. "You're too serious, Émile," she muttered, her eyes half closed. "You need to live more. Be like the other kids your age." Émile glanced at her, his heart aching with a mixture of sadness and frustration. He had tried to live like the others, tried to fit in, but the world they lived in didn't make sense to him. While they lost themselves in superficial distractions, Émile felt the deeper currents of life pulling at him, urging him to look beyond the surface. "I'm fine, Mom," he replied quietly, though he knew she wasn't listening. Her thoughts were somewhere else, lost in memories, perhaps, or dulled by the wine. He stood and gently took the glass from her hand. "You should get some rest," he said, guiding her to her feet. She didn't protest, just let him lead her to her room. As he tucked her into bed, Émile felt the familiar pang of guilt. He knew she wasn't truly happy, and there was nothing he could do to fix it. He could only watch as she slipped further away from the woman she used to be. Back in the kitchen, Émile stared out the window again, the twilight deepening into night. His thoughts drifted to La Mauricie National Park, the one place where he felt at peace. The vast expanse of wilderness, the quiet river where he would swim, the animals that seemed to understand him better than most people did. It was his sanctuary. In the park, he could escape the weight of his mother's struggles and the noise of the world. But tonight, something else tugged at his mind. A restlessness, a feeling that something was about to change. He couldn't explain it, but it was there, gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. For now, though, all he could do was wait. Chapter 2. The Weight of the World. Émile sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the muted television screen in the corner of his room. The news anchor spoke with the same intensity he always did, sensationalizing each story, feeding the cycle of fear and confusion. Émile had seen it all before. It was a never-ending stream of headlines designed to stir emotions and cloud the truth. The world, it seemed, had become lost in a sea of distractions, pulled away from what truly mattered. He turned off the TV, unable to listen any longer. The silence in his room was thick, broken only by the distant hum of the city outside. Émile's thoughts raced, filled with frustration and anger at a society that seemed content to remain blind to the deeper truths. People, he thought, were too easily swayed by the media's manipulation, too eager to consume what was fed to them without questioning it. The world around him felt shallow, devoid of the depth he craved. He wanted more, something real, something meaningful. But everywhere he looked, it was the same. Superficial distractions, people living their lives on autopilot, unaware of the bigger picture. Émile's only escape was La Mauricie National Park, the place that had become his sanctuary. It was the one place where the noise of the world faded, where he could reconnect with nature and feel at peace. The park's vast wilderness stretched out before him, offering solitude and the chance to reflect on the things that mattered most. It was there, by the quiet river, surrounded by towering trees and the sounds of the wild, that Émile found clarity. In those moments of solitude, he could strip away the layers of confusion and see the world for what it truly was. The park was more than just a place, it was a refuge for his soul, a space where he could breathe freely and think clearly. But tonight, as he prepared to head to the park, a sense of unease washed over him. Something felt different, as if the air itself was charged with a new energy. Émile couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. He grabbed his jacket and headed out the door, determined to find peace in the familiar woods, but also curious about the strange restlessness stirring inside him. The stars were beginning to shine as he made his way toward the park, the city lights fading behind him. Whatever awaited him there, Émile knew that tonight would be different. Chapter 3. The Encounter. The familiar path to La Mauricie National Park stretched ahead of Émile, but tonight felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The further he walked into the park, the quieter the world became, until only the soft rustling of leaves and the distant call of an owl filled the night air. Émile felt his heart quicken as he reached the clearing by the river, where he often sat to reflect. But tonight there was something waiting for him, something he had never seen before. A strange, otherworldly hum filled the air, vibrating gently through the ground beneath his feet. As he stepped closer to the river, his eyes widened. There, hovering silently over the water, was an enormous spaceship, glowing softly in the moonlight. Its metallic surface reflected the stars, giving it an almost ethereal appearance. Émile's breath caught in his throat. He had always believed there was more to the universe than what he had been told. But to see it so clearly before him felt surreal. He couldn't move, couldn't take his eyes off the ship. The hum grew louder, not frightening but inviting, as if the ship itself was calling to him. Without thinking, Émile stepped closer. The ship was unlike anything he had imagined, sleek, smooth, and somehow alive with energy. A hatch began to open, and a soft glow emanated from within. Émile's heart raced, but not with fear. There was a calmness in the air, a sense that he was meant to be here. From the shadows of the ship, a figure appeared. Tall and luminous, the being stood at the entrance, its eyes glowing softly. It wasn't human, but it wasn't frightening either. In fact, there was a gentleness in its presence that put Émile at ease. The being raised its hand slowly, as if beckoning him closer. For a moment, Émile hesitated. But something deep within him, something instinctual, told him this was the moment he had been waiting for. He took a step forward, and then another, until he was standing directly in front of the ship. The being didn't speak with words, but Émile could hear its voice in his mind, a soft whisper that echoed through his thoughts. "You are ready." With those 3 simple words, the door to the ship opened wider, and Émile stepped inside. Chapter 4: The Guide. The inside of the spaceship was unlike anything Émile could have imagined. The walls shimmered with soft, pulsating light, and the air seemed to hum with energy. The space felt alive, as if the ship itself was an extension of the universe, connected to everything around it. Yet, despite its strangeness, it felt calm, welcoming, even peaceful. The tall figure that had beckoned him aboard moved gracefully through the ship, its presence both gentle and commanding. Though no words were spoken aloud, Émile could feel a connection forming between them, as though their thoughts were intertwined. The figure seemed to understand Émile's every emotion, the curiosity, the wonder, the questions. "You are wondering why you were brought here." The being's thoughts echoed softly in Émile's mind. "We are the planet Cedars. We have traveled the galaxies for eons, helping to sustain life where it is needed, and nurturing the balance of worlds." Émile's heart pounded as he processed the being's words. Planet Cedars, beings that traveled across the universe to spread life. It was a concept he had never encountered, and yet, it resonated deeply within him. He could sense the weight of their responsibility, the incredible task they had undertaken to protect and preserve life on distant planets. "Why me?" Émile thought, unsure if the being could hear his silent question. "You have been chosen," the being replied without hesitation. "Not because of who you are now, but because of who you are destined to become." Émile stood in silence, absorbing the enormity of those words. Who he was destined to become. It was a concept that shook him to his core. He had always felt different, always sensed that there was more to his life than what he had seen in his small corner of the world. But to be chosen for something greater, to be part of something so vast and unimaginable, it filled him with awe and uncertainty. The being gestured for Émile to follow, and they moved through the ship, past vast open spaces and intricate systems that Émile could barely comprehend. The ship was both machine and living entity, a marvel of technology and nature combined. Finally, they arrived in a large circular room, its walls filled with shimmering lights that looked like stars. "Here, you will begin your journey," the being said, its thoughts guiding Émile's attention to the room's center, where a map of the universe flickered into view. Planets, galaxies, and entire star systems spread out before him, showing the vastness of the universe in a way he had never conceived. "You will travel with us, learn with us, and understand the delicate balance that governs life across the stars. But know this, Émile, you are not just a passenger, you are a part of this journey. What you learn here will shape your path, and one day, you will carry this knowledge with you, wherever you go." Émile's heart swelled with both excitement and trepidation. He had no idea where this journey would take him, but something deep inside told him that this was where he was meant to be. His life, once small and filled with quiet doubts, was now opening to the vastness of the universe, filled with the promise of endless discovery. And with that, Émile's journey with the planet Cedars began. Chapter 5: Between Two Worlds. The journey across the stars with the planet Cedars felt like something out of a dream. Émile traveled to distant worlds, each one unique in its beauty and struggles. Some planets were lush with life, teeming with creatures unlike anything he had ever seen. Others were barren, on the verge of collapse, their ecosystems fragile, and in need of the planet Cedar's guidance to restore balance. Émile marveled at the vastness of the universe, but with each new planet they visited, he couldn't shake a growing feeling deep within him, a longing for home. While the alien worlds were fascinating, he found himself missing the familiar sights and sounds of Earth. His heart ached for the quiet woods of La Mauricie National Park, for the scent of pine trees, and for the soft trickling of the river that had always calmed him. More than anything, Émile missed his mother. He had left her behind without a word, and he wondered how much time had passed since he boarded the spaceship. Time, it seemed, moved differently out here among the stars. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. He had no way of knowing how long he had been away from Earth. "You are homesick," the alien guide observed one day, sensing Émile's growing restlessness. Émile nodded, not surprised that the being could feel his emotions so clearly. "I miss my mother," he confessed. "I miss Earth, but at the same time, I feel like I'm meant to be here, to learn all of this." The alien nodded in understanding. "Your journey is not an easy one, Émile. You walk between two worlds now. The knowledge you gain here will change you, but it will also give you a choice. In time, you will understand what that means." Émile pondered the alien's words as they traveled to another planet. This one covered in vast, shimmering oceans. The beings that lived there communicated through the waves, their thoughts carried by the movement of the water. It was breathtaking to witness, yet Émile's heart remained heavy with the weight of his homesickness. One night, as they drifted through the quiet expanse of space, Émile sat alone in his quarters, staring out at the endless stars. His mind wandered back to Earth, back to his mother. He imagined her sitting alone in their small apartment, her hair graying and her face worn with age. Would she still be there when he returned? Would she recognize him after all this time? "I need to go back," Émile whispered to the stars. The next morning, he approached the alien guide. "I want to return to Earth. I need to see my mother." The alien studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Time moves differently in the universe. Much has changed on Earth since you left. Are you certain this is what you want?" Émile nodded. "I'm sure. I need to see her, and I need to bring what I've learned back with me." The alien guide sighed softly, but there was no resistance. "Very well. We will take you home. But remember, Émile, the journey you've begun is not over. The knowledge you've gained will continue to shape your path." And so, with the stars still shimmering around them, the spaceship began its journey back to Earth. Émile's heart was filled with both hope and uncertainty. He had learned so much from the planet Cedars, but now, it was time to return to the place where it had all begun. Chapter 6: A World Beyond. The return to Earth weighed heavily on Émile's mind. As the spaceship glided silently through the cosmos, he couldn't help but reflect on the incredible worlds he had seen. Planets where life thrived in ways he could never have imagined, and others where existence teetered on the brink of destruction. Each world had its own challenges, its own struggles to maintain balance. One of the most striking planets Émile visited was a world entirely covered in ice and snow, its surface gleaming under a cold sun. The inhabitants were peaceful, their civilization built around harmony with the natural world. They understood that life was fragile and could only be sustained through cooperation and balance. Despite the harshness of their environment, they found joy in the smallest things, like the warmth of a fire on a cold night, or the light that reflected off the ice as it sparkled under the sun. Émile had been captivated by their simple, yet profound way of life. In their frozen world, they celebrated life through togetherness and generosity. The elders of the community were revered, and stories of their wisdom were passed down through generations. It reminded Émile of the values his mother had instilled in him: the importance of family, of kindness, and of finding joy in the small moments. But even in this peaceful world, Émile couldn't escape the longing for home. He thought of Earth constantly, of the life he had left behind. His experiences with the planet Cedars had changed him, but deep inside, he was still that boy from Trois-Rivières, who had once found solace in the quiet woods of La Mauricie National Park. "You're thinking of home again," the alien guide observed, breaking Émile's reverie. Émile nodded. "Every world we visit teaches me something new, something important. But no matter how far we go, I can't stop thinking about my mother. About Earth." The guide smiled softly, understanding Émile's turmoil. "Every journey must come full circle, Émile. You are learning, growing, and gaining wisdom. But it is natural to long for where it all began." "I'm not sure if I'll even recognize home when I return," Émile admitted. "Or if home will recognize me." "You will see, Émile, that the lessons you've learned here will shape how you see your world. What was once familiar will now hold deeper meaning. But that is the gift of wisdom. It allows us to see life through new eyes." As they neared Earth, Émile's heart swelled with both anticipation and anxiety. He had seen the vastness of the universe, and he knew that Earth was just a small part of it. But it was his small part. And no matter how far he had traveled, it was where his heart belonged. The spaceship began its descent, and Émile looked out the window as the blue planet came into view. The familiar sight of Earth filled him with emotion, both joy and fear. He had been gone so long, and time, as his guide had warned, had moved differently here. Would his mother still be waiting for him? Or had the world he once knew changed beyond recognition? Chapter 7. The Return. The familiar blue and green of Earth filled the window as the spaceship glided closer, and Émile's heart pounded in his chest. He had seen many incredible things during his journey with the planet Cedars, but this moment, the moment of returning home, felt more overwhelming than anything he had ever experienced. The alien guide stood beside him, offering quiet support as the ship descended toward the surface. Émile's mind raced with thoughts of his mother, of how much time had passed, and what would await him once he returned. The weight of the unknown pressed heavily on him, but there was no turning back now. "We will stay just beyond sight," the guide said softly. "This part of your journey, Émile, you must face alone." Émile nodded, though a part of him wished the guide could accompany him. As comforting as the knowledge and experiences he had gained were, nothing could prepare him for what was waiting on the ground. The spaceship landed quietly in a remote part of the forest near La Mauricie National Park, not far from where Émile had first encountered the alien beings. The ship's door opened, and Émile stepped out into the familiar air of home. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze on his face, smelling the scent of pine and earth. It was just as he remembered, and yet, everything felt different. The forest was still, the same peaceful refuge he had always known. But as he made his way toward the edge of the woods and into the city, a sense of unease settled over him. The streets of Trois-Rivières were quieter than before, and the faces he saw seemed older, more worn. Time had moved on without him, and he couldn't help but wonder how much of his old life had changed. His footsteps echoed in the stillness as he approached the small apartment where he had grown up. The building looked older too, as though it had aged along with the city. Émile's heart ached with every step he took up the stairs, unsure of what he would find when he reached the door. He hesitated for a moment, his hand hovering over the doorknob. What if she wasn't there? What if too much time had passed? He pushed those thoughts aside, and finally opened the door. The apartment was quiet, and for a moment, Émile feared the worst. But then, in the soft glow of the evening light, he saw her, his mother, sitting by the window, just as she had so many times before. She was older now, her hair gray, and her movement slower, but it was her. She was still there. Tears welled up in Émile's eyes as he stepped forward. Mom. She turned slowly, her tired eyes searching his face. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. But then, something shifted in her expression, and a tear slipped down her cheek. Émile? Is it really you? Émile rushed to her side, falling to his knees beside her chair. It's me, Mom. I'm home. She reached out and touched his face, her hand trembling. I thought you were gone forever. I'm here now, Émile whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I'm here, and I'm never leaving again. They embraced, and for a while, there were no words, just the quiet reunion of a mother and her son, after what felt like a lifetime apart. Chapter 8. Home, but not the same. The quiet moments after Émile's return were bittersweet. He had found his mother, the one connection he had longed for during his journey across the stars, but time had not been kind to her. She was frail now, her body weakened by the passing years. Émile could see the lines of age etched into her face, the tiredness in her eyes, and it pained him to know that he hadn't been there to share those years with her. They spent days in quiet conversation, sitting by the window as the sunlight filtered into the room. Émile spoke of his journey, of the worlds he had seen, and the lessons he had learned from the planet Cedars. His mother listened with quiet awe, though much of it was beyond her comprehension. To her, Émile's return was a miracle in itself. Nothing else mattered. You've seen so much, she said one afternoon, her voice soft and raspy. But I can see it in your eyes. You're different now. Émile nodded, a lump forming in his throat. I've changed, Mom. I've seen things I never imagined, but no matter where I went, I couldn't stop thinking about you. About home. She smiled weakly and reached out to hold his hand. I'm glad you've come back, Émile. That's all I ever wanted. But you mustn't feel guilty for leaving. Life is a journey, and sometimes we have to walk our path alone. Émile squeezed her hand gently, his heart heavy. I missed so much. I missed being with you. She shook her head. You've come back, and that's what matters. I've lived a full life, Émile. And now you have so much to give, so much to share with the world. Her words weighed heavily on him, because deep down, Émile knew that their time together was limited. The years had taken their toll, and his mother's health was declining. Each day, she seemed a little weaker, a little more tired. He stayed by her side, determined not to leave her again. One evening, as they sat together in the fading light, Émile's mother took his hand once more. I want you to promise me something, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Anything, Mom, Émile replied, his heart tightening in his chest. When I'm gone, don't stop living. Don't carry the weight of the past. You have so much to give, Émile, so much kindness, so much light. Share that with the world. Make people smile, give them hope. That's the greatest gift you can give. Tears filled Émile's eyes as he nodded. I promise, Mom. She smiled, her eyes closing as she leaned back into the chair, her hand still resting in his. You've always had a good heart, she murmured. That's what makes you special. Those were the last words she spoke. Later that night, Émile sat beside her as she quietly slipped away, her breathing slowing until it finally stopped. The apartment fell into a deep stillness, and for the first time in his life, Émile felt truly alone. He wept silently, holding her hand in his, knowing that he had kept his promise, he had come home. But now, it was time for him to move forward, to carry her words with him as he stepped into the world once again. Chapter 9. The final goodbye. The days following his mother's passing were filled with a quiet sorrow. Émile moved through their small apartment, packing away her belongings, each item a memory of the life they had shared. The grief weighed heavily on him, but there was also a sense of peace. He had been able to say goodbye, to be with her in those final moments. As he sorted through her things, he found old photographs, letters, and mementos from their life together. His mother's face, younger and full of life, smiled up at him from the faded pictures. It was hard to reconcile the woman in those images with the frail figure she had become in her final days. But the love he felt for her had never faded, and he knew she had always done her best to care for him, even when life had been hard. One evening, Émile sat by the window, watching the snow fall gently outside. The quiet of the winter night reminded him of the peaceful moments they had shared by that same window. The world outside was calm, and for the first time in a long while, Émile felt a sense of clarity. He understood what his mother had meant in her final words to him. She had wanted him to live fully, to share the light inside him with others. Make people smile, give them hope, she had said. It was a simple request, but Émile knew it carried great weight. He had seen so much of the universe, learned so many lessons from the planet Cedars, but now, he had to find a way to use that knowledge here, on Earth. As the snow continued to fall, Émile thought about his journey. He had always felt different, disconnected from the world around him, but his experiences had given him a new perspective. He understood now that life wasn't about the grand gestures or material things. It was about the small moments, the kindness we show to one another, the love we share. He thought about the people he had met in his travels, the lessons they had taught him. On one world, he had learned the importance of generosity. On another, the value of joy in the face of hardship. Each planet had shown him that no matter where you are in the universe, the greatest gift you can give is yourself, your time, your kindness, your love. Émile knew that his mother had always believed in him, even when he had doubted himself. Now, it was his turn to live up to that belief. He couldn't bring her back, but he could honor her memory by living the life she had wanted for him. A life of giving, of spreading light and hope. The next morning, Émile rose with a sense of purpose. He packed up the few belongings he had left and prepared to leave the apartment. The world outside was waiting, and he was ready to face it with open arms. But this time, he wasn't leaving to run away. He was leaving to share what he had learned, to bring joy and hope to others, just as his mother had asked him to do. With a final glance around the apartment, Émile closed the door behind him and stepped out into the snowy streets. The air was crisp, and the city was quiet, but inside Émile's heart, a new light had been kindled. He wasn't just a man returning home anymore, he was something more. He was ready to become the guide, the giver, the one who could light up the darkest nights with warmth and kindness. His journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. Chapter 10, Becoming the Guide. As Émile stepped back into the world, he felt a new sense of purpose coursing through him. His mother's words echoed in his mind. Make people smile, give them hope. It was a simple truth, but Émile knew that the power of kindness and goodwill could transform lives. He had seen it on other planets, in distant worlds. How even the smallest acts of generosity could ripple out and change entire communities. He walked through the streets of Trois-Rivières, snow crunching beneath his boots, his breath visible in the crisp winter air. The city was familiar, yet Émile saw it with new eyes. He noticed the weary faces of people rushing to and fro, caught up in their own worries. He saw children playing in the snow, their laughter a brief burst of joy in the cold. He knew that what they needed wasn't the material gifts that society placed so much value on, it was connection, warmth, and love. Émile wandered through the town, stopping to help where he could. He offered a smile to those who seemed burdened by the weight of the world. He listened to the stories of strangers, lending a kind ear. He gave his time freely, and in return, he felt a growing sense of fulfillment. He began to realize that his role wasn't to be some distant observer of humanity, but to be part of it, to live among the people, to share his light with them in a way that was meaningful. And as he did, something miraculous began to happen. People noticed. The joy he gave to others was returned to him tenfold. A sense of community blossomed around him, with Émile at its center, quietly guiding those who needed it most. As the weeks passed, Émile's presence became known throughout the town. He didn't seek attention or fame, but people began to recognize him as the man who always had a kind word, a helping hand, or a smile to offer. They began to look forward to his visits, especially as the holidays approached. He would appear in the most unexpected places, a corner cafe, the local market, or the town square, always bringing warmth and laughter. One cold evening, as snow fell softly from the sky, Émile found himself at the town's Christmas market. The air was filled with the sounds of holiday music, the scent of mulled wine and roasted chestnuts. Families walked through the stalls, children's eyes wide with wonder at the lights and decorations. Émile watched it all with a sense of deep peace. This was what he had been searching for all along. Not the distractions of the world, but the moments that mattered. The moments where love, joy, and kindness flourished. As he strolled through the market, a young child tugged at his coat. Émile turned to see a small boy, looking up at him with wide, curious eyes. "Mister, are you Santa Claus?" the boy asked, his voice filled with awe. Émile chuckled softly, kneeling down to meet the boy at eye level. "Why do you ask, little one?" The boy smiled shyly. "Because you're always so nice to everyone. And Santa Claus is nice to everyone too." Émile's heart swelled with warmth. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "I'm not Santa, but I think you and I both know that Christmas is about more than just Santa Claus. It's about the joy we bring to others, the kindness we share. And anyone can do that, even you." The boy's eyes sparkled with understanding, and he nodded eagerly before running off to rejoin his family. As Émile stood there, watching the boy disappear into the crowd, he realized something profound. Maybe he wasn't Santa Claus, but the spirit of giving, the spirit of Christmas, was something he had embraced fully. And in doing so, he had become the guide, the bringer of light that his mother had always believed he could be. In that moment, Émile knew that his journey had come full circle. The boy's question echoed in his mind, and while he wasn't Santa, he now understood what it meant to live like him. To give without expecting anything in return. To spread love and joy in the simplest of ways. Chapter 11. The Meaning of Christmas. As the years passed, Émile's presence became something of a legend in Trois-Rivières and beyond. He never sought recognition, but people couldn't help but be drawn to him. The man who always seemed to appear at the right time, offering a helping hand or a kind word. He was a figure of warmth and generosity, a beacon of hope during the coldest, darkest days of winter. It wasn't long before people began to associate Émile with the holiday season itself. He had an uncanny way of spreading joy wherever he went, especially during Christmas time. Children whispered stories about the kind man who brought happiness and light, and adults found comfort in his presence, knowing that he embodied the spirit of the holidays in a way that went beyond material gifts. But Émile knew that what he had become wasn't just about Christmas. It was about something deeper. It was about the connection between people, the importance of showing love and kindness, not just during the holidays, but every day. The lessons he had learned from the planet Cedars, the wisdom his mother had imparted, had shaped him into a man who understood that the true gifts in life weren't the ones wrapped in paper, but the ones shared through actions and presence. Every year, as the snow began to fall and the streets filled with the sounds of Christmas carols, Émile would quietly go about his work. He helped those in need, comforted those who were lonely, and brought smiles to the faces of children. To him, it wasn't about being a hero or a legend. It was simply about being there for others, just as his mother had asked of him. Word of Émile's kindness began to spread far beyond his small town. People from neighboring cities and towns spoke of him in awe, and soon, stories about the man who lived like Santa Claus became a part of the local folklore. Children wrote letters, hoping to meet him, believing that he could bring the same magic to their lives that they had heard about in the stories. Yet, Émile remained humble. He never saw himself as anyone special. He was just a man who believed in the power of kindness, a man who had been given a second chance to share what he had learned with the world. As the legend grew, Émile found himself being referred to by a name he hadn't expected: Santa Claus. It began with the children, but soon even adults were calling him by the name, seeing in him the embodiment of everything Santa stood for. Émile smiled whenever he heard it, but deep down, he knew that the name wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the love, the joy, the spirit of giving that he had embraced. One snowy night, as Émile sat by the fire, reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this moment, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had become what his mother had always believed he could be: a guide, a giver, a man who could spread light in the darkest of times. As the flames flickered in the hearth, Émile closed his eyes, thinking of his mother's words. Make people smile, give them hope. He had done that, and in doing so, he had found his own purpose. But the journey wasn't over yet. There was still more to give, more to share. And as long as there were people who needed joy, who needed hope, Émile knew that his work would continue. Chapter 12: A Message from Santa. As the years went by, Émile's legend grew, and he embraced the role that people saw him fulfilling. He had become a symbol of generosity, love, and the true meaning of Christmas. But for Émile, it wasn't about the myth that surrounded him, it was about the simple acts of kindness that he shared with the world. One evening, as he sat quietly by the fire, thinking about his journey, a deep sense of clarity came over him. He realized that the lessons he had learned from the planet Cedars, his experiences with his mother, and the lives he had touched, had all led him to this moment. He had become a guide, just as they had told him he would. But now, it was time to share one final message with the world. The message that had been at the heart of his journey all along. As Émile's story comes to a close, there's something he would want us all to remember. In all the years he spent giving, listening, and bringing joy to others, he understood one simple truth. And it's something that Santa Claus himself would say best: the real meaning of Christmas isn't in the presents we receive, but in the presents we share with one another.
Children, remember, it's not the gifts beneath the tree that matter the most. It's the memories you create, those little moments of laughter, joy, and love that stay with you forever. The twinkling lights, the smell of freshly baked cookies, the sound of holiday music filling the air. These are the real treasures of Christmas. Too often, we get caught up in the rush to buy presents, to wrap the perfect gift. But the value of Christmas isn't measured in the gifts we exchange. It's in the time we spend together, the moments we share with family and friends, and the warmth that fills our hearts. Every hug, every laugh, every smile. That's the true gift. And don't forget, my dear ones, that the greatest gift of all is your presence. The presence of you in someone else's life, and your own. When you take the time to be with the ones you love, to listen, to care, that's what makes the holiday season magical. It's not the material things we receive, but the love we give that lasts a lifetime. The snow may fall and melt away, the presents may be opened and forgotten, but the feeling of being together, of showing kindness and compassion, is what truly makes Christmas unforgettable. It's the warmth in your heart, the memories in your soul, that will carry you through every season. So as you celebrate, don't focus on the things under the tree. Focus on the light you carry, the good you can do for others, and the joy that comes from giving of yourself. Remember, the most beautiful part of Christmas isn't the presents you give or receive. It's the love and goodwill you share with the world.
Chapter 13. A New Beginning. As Émile stood in the woods, the cold winter wind brushing past him, he felt a presence pulling him deeper into the heart of the forest. The snow crunched underfoot, the air crisp and still. There, amidst the towering trees, he saw something that seemed almost forgotten by time, an old, weathered sleigh. The sleigh was simple, its wood worn and splintered from years of neglect, yet there was a beauty in its craftsmanship, a sense of history that called to Émile. As he approached, his heart raced with a familiar sense of purpose. There, grazing peacefully in the snow, were a small group of reindeer, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. Émile knelt beside the sleigh, running his hand along the wood's smooth surface, feeling the weight of memories embedded in its design. The reindeer watched him with knowing eyes, as if they had been waiting for him all along. In his pocket, Émile felt the faint hum of the 7 hands of time watch. He pulled it out, the little gadget glowing softly, its 7 hands ticking in perfect unison. Without thinking, Émile pressed the small knob, and the air around him shimmered with energy. The planet Cedars had once told him this watch held the key to unlocking untold magic. And now, as he pressed it, he understood why. The old sleigh groaned as if awakening from a deep sleep, its form slowly transforming before Émile's eyes. The wood gleamed brighter, new layers of intricate carvings appearing along its frame. Soft red velvet seats materialized within the sleigh, luxurious and inviting. Golden details lined the edges, making the sleigh look as though it had been crafted by the hands of ancient artisans. It was magnificent, a sleigh fit for Santa Claus himself. But the magic wasn't finished. As Émile stood back, his own clothes began to shift and change. His simple winter coat lengthened into a deep crimson robe, lined with white fur. His boots gleamed, sturdy and worn for travel. A thick belt cinched around his waist, and a familiar warmth settled in his chest. He looked down at his hands, no longer the hands of a young man, but those of someone who carried the wisdom of ages. He had become the figure that lived in the hearts and imaginations of children around the world. He had become Santa Claus. The reindeer snorted and stamped their hooves in excitement, their harnesses now adorned with golden bells that jingled with every movement. They were ready. Émile climbed aboard the sleigh, feeling the soft velvet beneath him. He glanced up at the night sky, the stars twinkling like old friends. He knew what he had to do. "Let us go," he said softly to the reindeer, his voice filled with quiet determination. "Let us find a new home, where we can be the beacon of joy and love for that one special night of the year." The reindeer's ears perked up, and Émile called out to them by name: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, Blitzen. With a joyful leap, the reindeer dashed forward, pulling the sleigh into the air. They soared into the night sky, their bells ringing in the crisp winter air. The stars seemed to twinkle even brighter as they flew higher. and Émile felt a deep sense of peace. He was no longer just Émile. He was the embodiment of love, joy, and generosity, spreading hope to every corner of the world. As the sleigh ascended higher into the clouds, Émile heard a familiar voice, a voice that filled him with warmth and nostalgia. Santa Claus, the man he had become, but also the symbol of joy and love, spoke softly, his words carried by the wind.
The world hasn't changed, my dear reindeer. The people, they've simply lost sight of what matters most: joy, love, and the magic of being together. The media may run the world, filling it with distractions, but we, on this night, we remind them of what they've forgotten. It's not the gifts beneath the tree that bring true happiness. It's the laughter shared, the music that fills the air, and the love that flows between us all. We must guide them, just as we always have, to the light in their hearts. And together, we'll help them find joy again.
The sleigh soared across the stars, and as they flew through the night, Émile knew that this was just the beginning of a new journey, one filled with wonder, hope, and the magic of Christmas. The night belonged to them now, and they would be the beacon of love that the world needed, year after year, bringing joy to those who had forgotten its meaning. The end.